I thank my chairman for yielding. These are strange times. I saw my friend Alcee Hastings on the floor. I wanted to sit down beside him and whisper in his ear like we would have done when we'd gathered last year. Wanted to grab his hand and tell him I'd been praying for him, and now he's gone. Back off the House floor, back into social distancing. No one denies that these are unusual times, even dire times that require substantial response. And in many ways, what we're doing here today isn't unusual. We have a majority in the U.S. House of Representatives that will, in fact, jam through on an almost party line vote its agenda, and that's not unusual. We have a majority in the House that's going to implement its ideas for rules changes in the House, even without a minority amendment. That's not altogether unusual. But I've listened to colleague after colleague come to the House floor and talk about the unusual times that I would argue require an unusual response. I feel a little empty today in what I usually enjoy as a Rules Committee debate. I know how the Rules Committee goes, Madam Speaker. There are 9 members of the majority and 4 members of the minority. The majority wins every vote, and not by a little, by a lot. Your job as a minority member on the Rules Committee is to lose, and you go up there and you lose every day. And that's often the way the House is when we're trying to put together a House position that's going to go into negotiation. But I've heard the sense of urgency that I know each one of my colleagues on both sides of the aisle believe, and our sense of urgency today doesn't allow us time to push a messaging bill across the floor. Madam Speaker, this is the single largest borrow and spend bill the country has ever seen, and it included not one Republican amendment, not one. The single largest rules change the House of Representatives have seen in any of our lifetimes. And the underlying rules change includes not one Republican amendment, not one. I listened to my chairman, for whom I have great respect for, and candidly, the small nature of the Rules Committee, we're able to develop relationships that the entire institution is not able to develop. I wish everybody on the House floor knew the gentleman from Massachusetts as I believe I know the gentleman from Massachusetts. When he talks about fighting hunger, when he talks about us doing better, he's absolutely right and he's absolutely sincere. When he talks about people suffering, when he talks about people in desperate need, he's absolutely right and he's absolutely sincere. When my friend from Florida, Ms. Shalala, talked about she doesn't get calls in her office, she gets cries from desperate people in help, I know that feeling because my office gets the same one. But that's not everything that's in this bill. This bill isn't all testing. This bill isn't all hunger. And I offered an amendment yesterday in the Rules Committee that said, you know what? We're going to perpetuate the myth that we disagree on everything in this institution in a partisan way. Let's divide this 1,800-page bill up. Let's divide it up into sections, and let's support those things we can support and oppose those things we oppose. Let's support hunger prevention, remediation. Let's support food for children. Let's support testing for first responders. Let's do those things. But, Madam Speaker, as you know, this bill also repeals the SALT tax. It reinstitutes the SALT tax deduction. This is not an idea that's come about in an emergency. This is something we've been arguing about since 2017. This is something the Ways and Means Committee acted on in almost a purely partisan way in December. This is something the House acted on in a purely partisan way in December, long before we were talking about COVID. This is a provision where 80% of Americans, the bottom 80% of all income-earning households, receive 4 cents out of every dollar of this provision. 4 cents. To bottom 80% of Americans. The top 5% of Americans, the top 5% of income earners, receive 80 cents out of every dollar. It's not an emergency. It's not COVID-related. It is not going to the neediest of these, and it's not a $1 million provision. It's not a $1 billion provision. It's not a $10 billion provision. It is a $200 billion provision tucked into this borrow and spend bill. Madam Speaker, we don't disagree on serving those who need to be served. We don't disagree on medical research. We don't disagree on education. But we do have disagreements. 1,800-page bill, offered an amendment to say, let's divide it up into sections so we can support what we can support in a bipartisan way and push through in a partisan way those things that we can't support. It was denied. There are times and places to have partisan debates, Madam Speaker. Today is not one of them, and I reject the
Speaker, I yield the gentleman an additional minute.
I thank my friend from
Gentleman's recognized for an additional minute.
I thank my friend from Oklahoma. Madam Speaker, we have an opportunity, and not an opportunity that's an untread path as the paths we're on today. We have a well-tread path. I'll remind my colleagues as we fight amongst ourselves on this legislation, we've been to this floor already on COVID-related measures in a bipartisan partnership negotiated way, not once, not twice, 3 times we've gone down that path. For folks who are watching the debate today, Madam Speaker, I hope they don't take away that we are divided when it comes to supporting our constituency. I hope they don't take away that we're divided when it comes to standing united on behalf of those families that cannot stand for themselves in this tough time. And I hope for my colleagues who feel like they need to push a messaging bill through no matter what, that they remember those times just a few short weeks ago where we came together, where we stood together. Largest change in American history, largest bill, not one Republican amendment.